After the violence broke out inside the MLK Center as pandemonium ensued within Sprout Plaza, SRT officers watched inertly as people were being physically beaten directly in front of them on the other side of the building's glass doors. So this inaction was not negligence, it was intentional, wasn't it?
The inaction was intentional. The commander in charge there told his forces that they were to do nothing, that they were to go into the MLK Center and not let anybody come in.
Who told them to retreat? It was the politicians, the mayor, members of the city council, and the University of California chancellor. Now we know this because the police have contacted us.
UC Berkeley is where the free speech movement started in the 1960s. Ironically, a similar ideology that drove the original free speech movement is now obstructing free speech today.
When a taxpayer-funded public agency ratifies the efforts of somebody trying to shut down a speaker, that's unconstitutional, and that's what occurred here.
Welcome to Zooming In. I'm Simone Gao. On February 1st, 2017, a mob of leftist protesters swarmed the UC Berkeley campus, forcing a conservative commentator's planned speech to be canceled. The protesters beat some students and caused $100,000 worth of damage on campus. On January 11th, 2018, 4 of the victims sued the school and the City of Berkeley for personal injuries and violation of the First and 14th Amendment. This is the third case initiated by the same incident. Who were the protesters, and what are the social underpinnings? And will this start a new free speech movement? Let's take a look.
On the evening of February 1st, 2017, 2 hours before the conservative activist Milo Yiannopoulos was scheduled to speak at the UC Berkeley campus, protesters grew violent.
So we've got the BlackRock people out in force. They just showed up a couple of minutes ago, completely changed the tone of the demonstration, what had been largely peaceful, into much more of an aggressive and confrontational situation. And now we see the protesters, led by the BlackRock group, starting to make a move directly on the Martin Luther King Jr. student complex, where the
Soon after that, the speech was canceled, but that didn't prevent the escalation of the violence.
By 6:25, they had broken windows and set a diesel generator completely on fire. After that, police issued numerous dispersal orders, but for at least an hour, protesters remained, defying those orders. By a little after 8, many left and took to the streets of Berkeley, breaking windows of a Chase Bank and shattering doors of a Bank of America branch.
Students who were planning to attend the Milo speech were greatly outnumbered by protesters and became targets of violence. Among the victims, there were John Jennings, Trevor Hatch, Donald Fletcher, and Katrina Rettelsheimer.
I think a male came in with a pole and hit my husband on the head while people were hitting me on the head and on the back.
Katrina has moved out of California with her family since the incident. A year later, the 4 of them filed a complaint against the UC Berkeley police. William J. Becker Jr., founder and president of Freedom X Law Firm, and Sean Steele, founder and CEO of Sean Steele Law Firm, filed a lawsuit on behalf of the 4 victims against the UC Berkeley police. UC Berkeley, the City of Berkeley, and 2 individuals for personal injuries and violations of the First and 14th Amendment. which ensure freedom of speech and that all individuals are equally protected by all laws. Among others, they claimed the defendants' actions and inactions in their official capacity not only failed to protect them, but caused them more harm. One example of this is that at the height of the violence, the UCPD and UC Berkeley chose to abandon Sproul Plaza at the MLK Center, mostly for their own protection, while leaving the public exposed to violent assault. They erected barricades that closed off exit routes from Sproul Plaza for the public, leaving them, in effect, sitting ducks.
This is also from your complaint. After the violence broke out inside the MLK Center as pandemonium ensued within Sproul Plaza, SRT officers watched inertly as people were being physically beaten directly in front of them on the other side of the building's glass doors. They observed individuals being kicked in face, pepper sprayed, and hit with sticks. People were pounding on the glass door and crying, "Help me, help me, help me." So this inaction was not negligence, it was intentional, wasn't it?
The inaction was intentional. The commander in charge there told his forces that they were to do nothing, that they were to go into the MLK Center and not let anybody come in. In fact, they shut the doors to prevent victims from entering there and escaping their attackers. So it was clearly intentional. Now, it wasn't the first thing that they did, however, to create the dangerous condition that they created that gave rise to the injuries in our lawsuit. Bear in mind that they originally planned to have multiple what they call mutual aid law enforcement from the entire University of California system present to be able to confront the demonstrators who they knew were going to be coming in large numbers. So they actually had enough police officers present to be able to prevent the injuries and the property damage from occurring. Why didn't they do something? Well, it's our understanding that they ran a risk assessment at the time of the demonstration and determined that it would be less costly to the university to allow the demonstrators to do their work, their violence, than if they were to intervene. So the risk assessment that was done at the scene led to them to change their plan of operation, as we understand it currently. Now, we'll learn in the lawsuit whether that was the case, but that's what appears to have happened.
I wonder if money was the only reason behind this.
No, of course not. Money's not the only reason. They're motivated by a number of factors, not the least of which is that this is a university that is very much in favor of social justice and in favor of promoting social justice causes. In this case, the Antifa groups, the group By Any Means Necessary, and similar groups were engaged in social justice activism. That's something this university endorses and encourages. So part of the calculus for not challenging them and allowing them to overtake Sproul Plaza was to permit a message, an ideological message to be advanced that evening.
Our lawsuit is not only against the police of Berkeley, the city of Berkeley, but it's also against the police for the University of California. So there's two police departments. They are both assigned to protect the speech and to protect the people and the students wanting to watch the speech. But as soon as there were signs of trouble, they retreated. Who told them to retreat? It was the politicians, the mayor, members of the city council, and the University of California chancellor. Now we know this because the police have contacted us privately, because they know we're suing them. They were horrified. They were embarrassed. They were asked to stand down and not defend innocent students.
According to the complaint, at a post-incident information and briefing session at the UC Berkeley Police Department, when confronted by his colleagues for not protecting the public, Lieutenant Di Clolodi of the UCPD stated that the people who were beaten deserve what they got. He said, "They put themselves there. I'm not worried about it." Coming up, who are these protesters that UC Berkeley and its surrounding communities sympathize with? And what is their message? Stay tuned.
Well, I was gearing up to give a regular talk in Berkeley, like one of my college talks, like I always do, and we'd had some information that they were going to try some drama, and then suddenly we heard that the building was on fire and things were being destroyed outside, and it turned out that this armed mob of like 200 well-funded, well-organized, thugs had shown up ready for war, basically, throwing firebombs at the side of the building, like storming it. The police had been told to back off.
These perpetrators of violence are black bloc groups such as Antifa and BAM. Black bloc refers to groups of protesters who wear black clothes and black masks, making it difficult for police to identify them. They're often associated with anarchist groups. Antifa, short for anti-fascist, and BAM, by all means necessary, are two groups often associated with the black bloc. Antifa was born out of the clash between the fascists and Marxists in Italy in the 1920s. Leon Trotsky, leader of the Soviet Red Army, formed the first Antifa-style group, and he used this group to suppress those who opposed communism.
So in the 1920s, the Nazis and the communists used to have street fights. It's a street fighting culture. So you'd get up in the morning, you put on your leather jacket, you get out a couple of clubs, you put on your boots with steel tips on it, and you go out somebody from the Communist Party and beat them up. And they would do the same thing.
A fact worth noting is that in 1933, soon after Hitler destroyed Antifa, many members of the former Antifa group quickly switched sides to join the Nazis. How could two formerly opposing groups quickly joined forces with each other?
It would make sense they would switch sides to the Nazis because they have the same exact plans, they have the same exact schemes, they have the same exact devices. The only difference is which group gains control. And so ultimately, if the other group gains control of this battle of the wills, if you will, then, if you can't beat them, join them.
The Nazis and Antifa members do have one thing in common. That is, the continued use of violence as a means to achieve their goals.
America never had a street fighting culture. A culture. Thousands of young people just get up just to want to beat up somebody. But it came to America like a cancer around 1995 when there was an international conference in Seattle. And out of nowhere, anarchists started smashing windows and destroying property, and they said they were against globalism. Nobody was really sure what they were angry about, but worst of all, they attacked Starbucks. That personally upset me. Well, it became a new name, and they started calling themselves Antifa.
Around the time of the Trump election, Antifa gained more popularity. They've been particularly visible on college campuses such as UC Berkeley. And this is not surprising. Berkeley is where the free speech movement started in the 1960s. The free speech movement was under the influence of the New Left, and a big portion of the New Left gravitated to their takes on established forms of Marxism, such as the New Communist Movement. How did the New Communist Movement come about? It drew inspiration from Maoism in China, whose signature legacy includes the decade-long Cultural Revolution that eradicated much of China's traditional culture and sent millions and millions of young people and members of the intellectual community to rural areas for re-education.
However, the point here is not quite how left-leaning or pro-communist UC Berkeley has been since the free speech movement. The point is, according to Bill Becker, that UC Berkeley and its police department, as well as City of Berkeley, violated the U.S. Constitution.
The conservatives show up to listen to a conservative speaker. They're not there to disrupt anything. They're exercising their right of assembly and freedom of speech, right? And they're doing it in a peaceable manner. Left-wing groups have the same opportunity to engage in peaceable demonstrations of their First Amendment freedom of speech. They can apply for a permit, they can show up and peaceably assemble, and they do not have to face the risk of people disrupting their activities. So Basically, in those two scenarios, you see that both sides have the same rights under the First Amendment, right? What happens is the activists don't want to grant to the conservative speakers their First Amendment rights. They want to disrupt those rights. Now, they go out there and they claim, well, we have our First Amendment right of expression too, and we're out here to protest their views, and that's protected under the First Amendment. Well, it is to an extent. It is to the extent that it does not create violence, property damage, or disrupt the rights of others. And so they're a bit confused when they say they have a right to go out there and beat up people to get their point across, or they have a right to have an event canceled to make their point. That's called a heckler's veto, and that's an unconstitutional legal theory. It's a theory that says that when a public agency like the University of California is, when a taxpayer-funded public agency ratifies the efforts of somebody trying to shut down a speaker, that's unconstitutional, and that's what occurred here.
Coming up, are we seeing the beginning of the new free speech movement? Stay tuned. On February 10th, 2018, the conservative group Patriot Prayer was invited to speak at a rally on the University of Washington campus.
I ask that you bring peace onto this campus today. I ask that you bring peace and love into Seattle, Washington, to the entire state. We all know this country is divided right now, and most of it, the enemy is loving. The enemy loves how much we hate one another, and God, I ask that you bring some peace here onto this campus.
It's not easy to be Republican on a campus like University of Washington. So they put up with a lot of harassment that I put up with in the last year, so I'm just here to kind of come together and encourage one another.
Don't fuck with this guy. Don't push him! Don't push us, dude! Don't push me, dude! Get out of here! Get out of here! Get out! Get the
At first, the university intended to charge the conservative student group $17,000 to cover the security cost. However, after Bill Becker's Freedom X law firm filed a complaint about it, a federal judge overruled it. Similar things are happening in other campuses as well. UC Merced reduced the security fee from $17,000 to $1,600 for a speech by Ben Shapiro. Milo Yiannopoulos, after being rejected by UC Berkeley, was able to successfully speak to 800 students at Cal State Fullerton in October 2017 for no extra security cost, after Sean Steele and his colleagues negotiated with the school, the police department, and the mayor.
That was a huge lesson, not only for me and Bill, because we're learning all the time. It's a new field of law for us, but it was also a lesson for the conservative students. They're learning how to fight the establishment, fight the system, and win.
On January 25th, the U.S. Department of Justice filed a statement of interest in the Berkeley case in support of the students, agreeing that their complaint adequately pleads that the university's speech restrictions violate the First Amendment. Associate Attorney General Rachel Brand also said in a statement that this Department of Justice will not stand by idly while public universities violate students' constitutional rights. On today's American campuses, the anti-Trump protests oftentimes still gain the upper hand during demonstrations when they show up in much bigger numbers, with bigger banners and chanting well-practiced verses. However, the conservatives are holding their ground as well.
Martin Luther King was an expert at this. That's exactly what he did. He went, when the racist white people said, you can't go to that diner, he went straight to that diner. Every single time. Every single time. They went certain parks, certain places, they said that they can't go. That's where they went. And they would take the meetings, they would take the hate, they would get it on film, and they would show it for the rest of the world to see. And that's what we've been doing in the last year, and that's what...
I wonder if Martin Luther King has ever thought of this. Half-century later, a group of white men inherited his legacy and started a new wave of free speech movement. Zooming In will keep you updated about this movement in the future. This concludes our today's program. Thanks for watching. I'm Simone Gao, and see you next week.